Welcome to the Grinders Table, the podcast where we sit with C-suite executives and founders who are taking their industry by storm to figure out how you can build an exceptional career and business. Together, we'll try to uncover how they are both defying the odds and what you can learn from their experience. Hi, everyone. Today I'm excited to have someone I regard as a friend. And in my usual fashion, I don't like introducing people, so I'm going to allow Tomi introduce himself. So, Tomi, over to you.
Hi guys, my name is Tomi. Tomi Solanke, as some people know me. Tomi from Trove, as some people know me. I don't know. I think that's about it. But I currently run Trove Finance as CEO. Trove Finance essentially allows Africans invest in global companies that they know and love. I think that's the shortest way of describing myself and the business I run.
Okay, people, he's actually underselling himself, but we're going to get to there. So, can you tell us the journey to Trove? I mean, where did this love for, I wouldn't say tech, but because it's a combination of tech and finance, fintech. Anyways, can you tell us about your journey? How did you get here?
The journey is long. The journey is
Yeah, then tell us. We're open to listening.
uh, in the famous words of Burna Boy. I don't travel many kilometers. Okay, jokes aside. So I've been very interested in the space, for quite some time. I and not just when I say the space, I don't just mean technology, like business in general. And when I say quite some time, I know people, typically say, "Oh, since I was a kid, like, I had my first business when I was 6 and everything." Mine wasn't 6, but when I was in uni, I used to trade, for people. I used to do a little bit of buying and selling then. And through trading, essentially, when I say trading, it's like I used to trade Forex when I was looking for how to make money, like in uni. I got exposed to like tech. And somewhere along, my journey in university, I actually started a company then. And I think that's where the inflection for me happened. And I was like, okay, you know what? I think this is an industry I really want to stay in. I don't know whether, along, the journey of this conversation, I'll dive into that, my first experience or my first foray into tech. But typically that's, it started from, experimenting with, websites, AdWords, all those things that were very nascent and very interesting, because they were like, very new things then. I think those kind of things grew my interest in tech in general, and I think as I continue to transition through life, I just continue to get deeper and deeper into it.
Huh. But let's still take some step backwards. I know you didn't have that lemonade stand at 6, right? But what did you study in school, and did that have any bearing to the person that you are right now?
Zero. Okay, so I did engineering, chemical engineering in school. Did it have any bearing to where I am now? I would say it's a yes and a no. I think to a very good extent, like staying around people that are analytical and trying to calculate things, helps sharpen your mind to some extent, But I don't think all of my peers then, were thinking about business per se. Most of them were thinking of like, NMPC, Mobile, Chevron. I think those were like the hot places to work at then. So on one hand, I would say yes, which is, help me be a little more analytical, with the way I think about things or the way I process, information. But at the same time, I don't think he pointed me in the direction of business. I think that was something that I'd always liked. And, as time progressed, I just continued to, get deeper and deeper and deeper into.
Interesting. I mean, this takes me to a conversation I've had with a couple of people where we talk about how what you study in your formative years sort of determines or defines who you will be in the future, whether you're going to practice in that field or not. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, not really. I think a lot of people like go in the direction of their interests most times, right? A lot of people end up doing what they don't want to do, mostly due to like societal like influence, parental influence. But most times, if you ask most people, or most of the people I've had conversations with, ended up doing, stuff opposite of what they studied like in school. I think it has an influence to a certain extent, but I think what has a bigger influence is really what you have interest in. Because like eventually life will throw you in that direction, or you throw yourself in that direction eventually. So it has some influence, but I don't know that influence is that massive to the point that it actually sways the direction of the person's life, 100% of the time.
Talk about interest. Would you, I mean, there is another, would I say advice going around or anti-advice going around where people say, chase your passions. Do you think that that line of thinking is the most effective if we look at, I mean, the global perspective, or even for you, the Nigerian perspective too, even if you're building a global company? Do you think that following that thought process of always chasing your passion is the right way to go when you're building out a career, you're building a business?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like, for me, the rule of thumb is like passion meets, I don't know whether scale is the word, or passion meets profitability is the word. I think that perfect intersection is like where most people should play. Like if your passion, for example, is to, I don't know, let me think of the most random thing that people can do. I don't know. Nothing is coming to mind now, but there are random passions that people have that can be monetized, or are not monetized, popular. They're not things that are popularly monetized. Um, and so I would say that perfect intersection between, what you like, and what is profitable. I think that's the safest space to play in. Maybe if you're a trust fund child, ja, or like if you come from a family where like your parents were, are Dangote, then you can, or like a perfect example is Segway, Otedola, DJ Copy, those kind of people. You can be DJing up and down, and just be enjoying your passion, even if your passion, eventually, that one, it looks like her passion self is giving her some money, self, but maybe if you're a trust fund kid, then you can just stay on the side of, passion itself. But I think that perfect intersection of like passion meets profitability, I think that's really where most people should play. And most passions, if you look at it deeply, there are different ways of expressing one's passion. For example, I had a conversation with somebody in the office, and the person wants to be a singer, wants to be um, an OAP, just wants to be in media in general, right? And we all had a conversation with the person saying that you don't have to pursue this thing to the point where you're on the grind for 10 years, waiting for the time you will blow. How about you try to use those same skill sets in this same organization, in any organization that you find yourself, perhaps host a podcast, for the company that you're in, or, host a, or be a compare for like events when the company hosts like seminars or programs, this kind of thing. So, there are other ways of, it's not just chasing the passion blindly. There are other ways of bringing the passion and, trying to utilize it within an environment that also could either increase your value in that organization, or help you get more money. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's
Absolutely. I actually agree with you. A passion that you can't necessarily monetize or sustain, that can't sustain your livelihood, becomes more of a problem in the end.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree with you. So let's go back to Trove. How did Trove start exactly?
Interesting. Let me try to rewind a bit. So I think it's been like a long time. I think like one of the things is, I think it's consistency, that brings people to certain problem statements in the future, or to stay in a space to the point, so long to the point that you actually build and build and build and you land on something else. So like I said earlier, I used to trade in school. So like I remember I think my second year in school in university. So I went to University of Lagos. My second year in University of Lagos. Um, I was then there used to be something called Success Digest. It used to be like all this, what's the name? It used to be like all these newspapers that they used to drop on the road, that you buy for like 100 naira. I can't remember how much it was then. So like I used to buy all sorts of business papers, just trying to hack this whole money thing. I think one day I picked it, maybe my first year, or like my SS3 or something in school. And then I started seeing about like I think then was most of these industries were very nascent, or technology was still very, early. People were talking about Forex, things like binary options were a thing then. Forex was like a thing then. It was even, I think it was still new then. Um, Trading generally, derivatives, all of these things were still very new then. I stumbled on it, started playing around with the idea of, trading alongside plenty other things that I was doing then. I experimented with AdSense then, AdWords then. I had multiple websites that I built, plus other things that, I was marketing, selling, rechargeable television, different things. Um, but like I actually was interested in this trading thing, right? So my second year in school, I then aggregated, and I was getting like decent enough success with it, right? I then aggregated friends' money. Like I carried some of my friends came to me be like, guy, how far now? I see that you're making this, $20 every week, So what's up? So I collected people's money then. I used to aggregate capital from people. Then I was doing it consistently, learning a little bit more, playing, experimenting more with my own money, but like with a little of other people's capital. Somewhere in I think my third year, yeah, still. I think one day I made one bad decision. I was too greedy. Everybody's money disappeared. Everybody started chasing me, But that also made me step back a bit, went to learn a little bit more, about risk management and all of those things, especially with trading. And I still continued, that same thing. At some point, I stopped carrying people's money, obviously, before I was going to get locked up or something. I just, killed that part of me. Um, I started trading again in 2014 or something. I can't remember when, cryptocurrencies were like a thing. I think 2015-ish. I can't remember. Unfortunately, I didn't keep it again. So it's like one of those stories of people that bought something then, and unfortunately, they didn't keep it long enough to become millionaires or whatever. Um, but then, I think 2017, again, I came back into that same space, to build, for a problem, which is I wanted to invest in 2015. I saw a tweet from Chamath Palipatia saying like buy Amazon stock in 2015 or something. I can't remember. And I'm like checking on the internet, like how can I buy this Amazon thing? I already had like prior experience, but checked everywhere. Quora, check Naira Land. I'm seeing like lots of people saying the exact same thing. And so I reached out to my friend in the US, right, Austin, and I say, hey, Austin, how far now? Guy, I'm trying to buy this Amazon. He's like, guy, do you have a SSN? I'm like, what's SSN? I do some research on it. It's a social security number. I was like, I don't have a. He's like, maybe you have to become an immigrant. So I'll come to the US, to get this thing. Unfortunately, couldn't do that. So that opportunity died. Um, Coincidentally, he now called me a year later saying like, oh, dude, how far? Rates then were like, I think Nigerian rates on like bonds and stuff were like 18-20%. So he called me and said, his mom is trying to buy, I think an FGM bond then. And I say, dude, back at you, man. You have to have XYZ, right? And it became a running joke. And then a couple of my other friends who had the same problem, eventually we're like, okay, you know what? People have this thing. I have this thing. You have this thing. How can we solve for our own, problems, but at the same time, solve for every other person, across the continent that's experiencing exactly a semblance of that same thing. And, I think that was the beginning of it. And, like they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, and I think in life we all get to that. I would call it inflection point where you you find the problem. So I said problem, a problem in a big area meets your own interest and say maybe your skill or ability. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to structure this question out. What was that time you decided to start Trove? You said, man, I just have to turn this into a business. I see this problem. I understand the market. I have some of the skill. I have some of the connections. I need to turn this into a proper business.
Yeah, interesting. I actually do not have all of the things you're mentioning. Um, but I think what if I say like generally in my life, right? If I think back a little bit, and I think that's what led to this point was I think like in 2015, And 2015, I'd been experimenting with all this, like building the idea of they say you can build a company, build this, build that. I didn't really understand, how to build something sustainably or like, funding, all of these things that people throw around, every now and then. But then in 2015, like I had like this, we had like this, and a couple of people had like this idea. It came together with one or two friends of mine, did like a basic prototype. We're just trying to build out something that we thought was cool. And then 2015, we got somebody that we're looking up to then, um, he was in media, Don Jazzy. He came, invested in the business. We got someone else to invest in the business. I was like, a 20-something-year-old, and people were saying like, oh, you know what, I'll buy 10%, 5% at this and that. And for me, that was where the whole mindset just really changed about like startups in general. And then I now said, maybe there's actually some opportunity to actually build something here, right? And so, like in doing that, and all the issues that came with that, um, naturally, when Trove came about, it was more of a, what, how can we hack this thing, or what are the roadblocks here? I don't think things were perfect. We just had to um, pull together resources. I just had to hustle. I think a hustle is the word, because like Trove, for example, when we did it, nobody had done it. In sub-Saharan Africa, there was no product that did that. As far as I was concerned, like across the continent, there was only one person that had done it in South Africa, and that was like a byproduct of a major multinational, like one of the biggest wealth managers, and they were not even doing it the way we're thinking about doing it. So too many roadblocks. We just had to keep pushing, pushing, pushing. We didn't have one Oga at the top, or we didn't have some gatekeepers that knew us or something. We just had to keep pushing, send cold emails, warm intros, you know. Um, and I think that's pretty much. I think more is more of a thing of like persistence and just like pushing and pushing. I think that's what really.
Yeah, yeah. In the life of an entrepreneur, and not just entrepreneurs, even if you're building a corporate career, that drive, that persistence is actually very, very important. But I mean, to be persistent, you need to have something that either motivates you or is core to your belief, or a goal. For you, what keeps you up at night? What keeps you going even when things are not working the way it should be? I remember the time that regulators in Nigeria were on your neck at some point, or on the neck of people that were building in your vertical. I mean, what drove you to keep on pushing and making this work?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm one of those kind of people. I'm one of those people that I set out to do something, right? I don't feel the need to bow out until I feel like there's some level of accomplishment, around like, okay, what I actually initially set out to do, right? So for me, like one of the thing was just like, okay, you know what, this is actually what you set out to do. Like you guys just try to chase it to the end, or as far as you can, chase. And then if you try, you exhaust all options, and it still seems like, okay, this continues to be a roadblock. Then if you throw in the towel at that point, then you can sleep. I can sleep at night. A second thing is just pretty much, I think it's more value for me, right? Once I see, or I'm having conversations with people that are using a product, right, and seeing like the kind of impact that that product is, creating for people. For me, it's like it's not shutting off or shutting out, all of the opportunities that I've created, and by virtue of that product, shutting it out to every other person and just saying like, okay, you know what, I have these challenges. I don't care about you people. In fact, I'm killing this thing, or for me, I feel like to an extent, I have like a fiduciary responsibility to the people that use the app, right? So I'm supposed to do right by those people, right? Because opportunities have been created. Income. I want to say opportunities is like to generate income, to put yourself through school, to your daily livelihood. Sometimes is tied to the gains you make off a product, or on a product, or especially within like the context of like investment, wealth management. And that's one thing that just keeps me going. Like, you know what, I can say, okay, you know what, I'm at a spot where, okay, let me go and find this job, or let me go and build this other company, or let me go and do something else with myself. But for a lot of other people, that's not the same story. I think some of them, um, putting money on an app and being able to generate 20%, 50%, 100% returns on the small 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 naira. That's all that a lot of people have. And so for me, like, it's just like, just keep pushing. um yeah, I think
Huh? Okay. Um, so recently on Twitter, there was this whole conversation around bosses and oftentimes I tell people that leadership is hard. People scream they want to be CEOs, they want to lead people, but they don't know that leadership is hard. For you, what exactly is your leadership style? And how would you advise founders to lead their teams so that they either retain talent or they build out sustainable companies?
yeah. So I think this is the thing that, experimentation, like, I've tried and I've learned from. I would typically say somewhere between, the way traditional companies operate and, the flat structure type setup that, you know, we all like to throw around, where, everybody's accessible. The work environment is a certain way. I think somewhere in between, that fine line is the best. Because the truth is, you you build an organization, you say, oh, you want people to feel free. You want people to communication to be open. You want people to interact with each other without any limitations or barriers. I just want a very friendly and family-like work environment. The problem with most of that is that a lot of times people begin to, take their responsibilities for granted. If you don't control it, people begin to take their responsibilities for granted. Insubordination can kind of happen in those settings sometimes when the structure is too flat. So for me, my own style is somewhere. I think I evolved into that actually. I started off as the pure flat type structure type of person where, like, if you have a problem, come to me. um but then I also then learned that, okay, you know what, sometimes, that's what managers are for. People need to manage people, and then perhaps a CEO's role is not to directly interface with everybody. um because sometimes, cutting out some of these other responsibilities from people that are hired to do certain things, doesn't really make things a little more, or make it more efficient. So it's somewhere in between. A little bit of, a very flat structured type environment, but at the same time structured, structured the same way a legacy or a traditional company, in terms of, like, what's the word? In terms of, like, the way they structure their KPIs, the way they structure their goals and all of those things. But in terms of, like, being agile, in terms of, like, creating a, friendly work environment, I'm all for that. But at the same time, people have to be responsible for what they're doing. And, like, structure, where there's no what's the word? Or how do people say it most times? Where there's no law, there's no sin. Right. So I think somewhere in between for me, that's really where I try to live or exist.
Absolutely. I actually owe you lunch for saying this because I also believe that CEOs
I'll take
don't
your lunch.
necessarily
I'll
have
take
to
your lunch.
interface with everybody. You actually just need to hire competent managers that take off that responsibility of managing would I call them the foot soldiers or the
Yeah.
co-workers or whatever I want to call them.
Yeah.
I've taken enough of your time, but it would not be the grinders table if I don't ask you about one time you failed and how you came out of it, and you have to be honest because I'll go and check. But how am I going to check? Anyways,
Ah, how did I come out? I would say, like, what's the word? I wouldn't. Every blessing is, or, every failure is somehow a blessing in disguise. Like, I guess we live and learn. This particular scenario, I won't say I won't say I came out of it per se, but like I believe like there was a huge learning opportunity there. Back to the story of 2015. Um, you know, I was then that was 2015, 7 years ago. That was quite some time ago. I was like in my mid 20s. Then I had this idea that I was building. Had celebrities involved in it. Then I remember then it was a big deal. Like, oh, we'll go to Don Jazzy's house. Then um and then, he was like going to be like the brand ambassador for the product. He was investor in the product. We also had like other, people in like the music industry, like investing in the product. We had, as somebody in mid 20s then, we had an office space of, I think it was like a seven rooms or something, like a whole floor. It was just really, interesting. I was like, okay, you know what, this is going to be the next big thing. Um, and somewhere along the line, right? Human beings started to clash with human beings, and then I learned it and I don't feel like till today I managed that process very well, to be very honest. Now, when I say everything's a blessing in disguise, perhaps, in hindsight, everybody thinks like, okay, this thing I'm doing right now is going to be my big break or my biggest break. In hindsight, maybe God had something, prepared for me, or it's not even maybe God had something else prepared for me. But I feel like I didn't manage that process. All of us, a bunch of us became we're not friends as a result of that again. Um, I made it my own responsibility to reach out to some of these people, years after, to try to bridge. But then I learned a very important lesson of like, people management. I think that's a very key ingredient in life. um you just have to learn how to manage people. It was very sad for me. I almost fell into like depression that period for like a whole year, because I was like, this was supposed to be my big break. This is the biggest thing I've done up until now. It just looked like you're on the cusp of like something big, and just because everybody's personality just began to clash, and you could not just actualize that dream. So I was bummed about it for like a while, for like a year or even more than a year, because I was seeing everything literally shining in front of me. Like, there was a big bank account, there was a nice office, there was like celebrity endorsers, there was this, like, it was like one of those things that you just launch and they're like, 20 something year old guy launches XYZ. Everybody was excited around me. But I think that people management part, I think it was a huge lesson for me there. There was a big question mark, and I just really had to go back to the drawing board and just try to better that side and understand that, okay, you know what, people think differently, and you have to learn how to balance all of that together.
Oh yeah, success, even if it's very little, comes with its own challenges, really. Um, I have two more questions to go. I know I've taken enough of your
No, no,
time.
no, 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 please. I'm having fun.
So we're building a world-class company like Trove. You oftentimes have to spend a chunk of your time either with the team, either with the product, either trying to strategize or, chart a course for the company. How do you then balance it with a personal life? The reason I'm asking this question is because I've been in the industry for quite a while, and I've seen people look back and regret that they did not manage their personal life, or they didn't come to a balance. I don't even think you can actually find a balance. I think you can give things the attention it needs per time. But how did you do it, or how are you doing it? Because I mean, everybody's in a work in progress.
Yeah, I think the thing is there just has to be that line. I think that's the only way. There's really no way of, because all these you can't put a timeline to like responsibilities, or put a timeline to family, or put a timeline to business. Like, a lot of these things just happen like randomly. So something might just your aunt, your brother, your sister, your wife, anybody can just call you and say, oh, XYZ is happening, or you see something that is deserving of your time at a specific moment. um, I think you just have to figure out that, okay, you know what, I'm doing this at the moment, or this period is for this, and this is the cutoff for all of this stuff. Um, and then you progress into doing some other thing. I don't know whether it's segmenting your life, or I don't know the way of explaining it, but the truth is, like, sometimes your passion can be so overwhelming. You're working on you love something so much, you're so focused on something, you work on it 2 o'clock, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It takes you away from like the other important people in your life to the point where you now become detached from reality. You're just living in your own bubble, right? And that can be problematic in itself. So I think it's just delineate properly. Just say, okay, this time is for X, this time is for Y, and try to make it or not let those things clash or overlap with each other. I think for me that's been the most practical thing, or the most practical way I've dealt with like all of these things. Because sometimes your passion can override you to the point that you lose sense of every other important thing that's going on around you, and that's now very unhealthy in itself.
Absolutely. I feel like ringing a bell right now. Can hear me hit the table. We've come to the end of this conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. But before we go, I'd like you to drop like 3 advice to anybody trying to build a world-class company or grow in their career. Insights from your own journey.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see. If I were to limit to 3, let me see. Okay.
Oh, you have more?
No. I think I'll put one extra one. But okay. So the first one for me would be, and I think I've just really learned it. You need to really, I call them shippers, right? You need to hire shippers, right? Especially within the context of tech. People build things, technology that's not relevant, or they treat business like it's a pet project. And if you surround yourself with too many people thinking that way, and what I mean by pet project is like they're not really focused. They don't understand that, okay, what business is actually you generating revs, you actually pushing out things that are of value to other people outside. So some people are living in a bubble in their own head, right? And just saying, okay, you know what, let me use HTML instead. No, let me use Python instead. Let me use, instead of understanding, okay, there should be an intersection between like, actual business, the numbers, and product. So for me, it's like hire shippers. People understand that, okay, the core essence of a business is actually to generate revenue, and we'll do whatever it takes, whether cut corners, to go to market quickly, or whether, burn the midnight candle, just to make sure like you're shipping out stuff, as opposed to people that are just, taking things or looking at business as a pet project of some sort. So that's one thing on the people side. I think the second thing is like hire people. I think a lot of people say, hire people that are smarter than yourself, or at least surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, or at least on the same level of knowledge as yourself. For obvious reasons, right? You can't what's the word? You can't drink from an empty river or an empty cup, right? So the people around you also should be able to chime in, the people you work with should be able to criticize, your ideas, should be able to come up with like ideas that are equally as amazing or even better than, the ideas that you come up with, on your own. And should be able to tell you the truth ultimately about like, okay, this doesn't work, this is not good, and bring a fresh and unique perspective to like whatever you guys are building or working on. Some people get comfortable like, oh, let me get someone that is not smart or not as smart as myself, so I can feel like Lord and Savior, in this business. But that's not necessarily constructive. So surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, or at least function on the same wavelength. And I think third thing for me would be enjoy yourself generally. Like it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's not like, oh, they say, oh, this company raised 100 billion US dollars and they started 2 months ago. That's not everybody's story, right? Some people would build businesses over a 7-year period, some over a 2 year, some over a 1 year. And then the exits are different for people, right? Just be focused on building something sustainable, building something that, provides value to people, and just enjoy that process. And the last thing for me would just be like, that's the extra free bonus. So I need another, launch on top of the launch that you've given me before. So the last thing for me would just be, just try to expose yourself, like listen to podcasts, read books, listen to podcasts, listen and read books, and try to understand like, experiences from other people. Because, sometimes in understanding, the failures of others, you can also build on your own success itself, or you can accelerate your own success itself.
Amazing, amazing stuff. You've all been listening to Tomi of Trove, and he spent 30 minutes, 35 minutes of his time really sharing with us his journey and his insight. Tomi, we have to grab lunch together whenever we're in Lagos.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much for spending time with us.
Thank you. Oh, before I go, let me recommend. So for founders, I think interesting things to check out for, like listen to a podcast, is How I Built This by Guy Raz. That's my favorite podcast.
Love it.
And then for books, I think I'm like this Peter Thiel fan. I'm like a fan of Peter Thiel. I'm like a fanboy, So one of my favorites is like 0 to 1. So that's a book. And then Competition is for Losers.
Mm-hmm.
Not a book per se, but it's a speech that he gave at, I think, Stanford or something. But like, I think they PDF'd the thing too as well. So I think, to add to my previous point, try to listen to some of these things. I'm sure hopefully will benefit or help you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
That's all on today's episode of The Grinders Table, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at MonsieurOM. That's at Monsieur for Miss in French, OM. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.